So, hi, I'm Danny and I read the book A Tale of Two Cities by Charles Dickens, and it starts in 1775 when there's this guy named Mr. Lorry, or Jerry, they call him sometimes, is sent on like this quest or mission thing to get this guy named Mr. Mayonnaise back out of this like prison place in France, back to his daughter Lucy, who's in England waiting to see him and stuff. And after they get him back and they're all like, oh, family reunion, yay. The girl Lucy spends years, because her father went kind of cuckoo in jail, she spends like a lot of years trying to help him like get his memory back and stuff, because he got off his rocker. Mr. Lorry and then this maid lady named Miss Pross helped her make him get his memory back and stuff. And then in another part, like during the middle of the book, when they're all happy, he got his memory back and stuff, he remembers stuff and he's not crazy anymore. There are these three guys, Sidney Carton, Charles Darnay, I think is how you say it, and Mr. Stryver. They all fall in love with Lucy, and she doesn't know if she likes all of them or not, and she's all like, oh! And then they're all like kind of come up with ways to marry her. And while this is all happening, Charles Darnay, he's like this French spy kind of thing, and he goes to France and meets up with his uncle, who's like something they call the Marquis in French. I'm not sure exactly what it means. It might be like the governor or something. And he talks to him, and they're like talking and stuff. And like their family did all these crimes, and then he's asking him if he wants to do what his family did, and he said no, and all this stuff like he would never do it, and that he should find somebody else to do it. And so he leaves after that and goes back to England. But like the day he leaves, the Marquis is stabbed and he dies. And he dies. He gets murdered. And and then Lucy ends up marrying Charles because he professes this love story, and then he's all like in tears and stuff, and then she feels bad for him, and she marries him. And then later she finds out that he was a spy and that his parents locked up her dad in prison. And then a couple years after that, Charles goes over to France for summer vacation, like, oh, la-da-da-da. And then he figures out that the queen and the king were beheaded, and soon he gets taken prisoner too, because he's like, oh, he did something wrong. They like accuse him of treason or something, and then then they take him prisoner. But lucky for him, Mr. Mayonnaise and Lucy hear about it, and then they go off to France to save him. And they go off to Paris, because it's happening in Paris, where they're going to kill him, and save Charles. And luckily, they get Charles off the hook, because somehow Mr. Mayonnaise is like, oh, I'm Mr. Popular, like Justin Bieber was in France. He's like, oh, I'm popular, yeah, somehow. And sadly, Charles isn't that lucky, like ever at all. And then there are these two people, Mrs. and Mr. Defarge, and they were keeping the guy, Mr. Mayonnaise, kind of like prisoner in this room. And they accuse Charles, again, being a French traitor, and then using a letter that the guy who was locked up in jail, Mr. Mayonnaise, wrote many years ago when he was first getting imprisoned. They condemned him to death using it. And the note said all the stories of crimes and stuff that Charles's uncle and father committed. And I think this is really unfair, but the government thinks, they're like, oh, your father died and so did your uncle, so you have to pay, we're going to cut your head off. And they're like, oh, you have to pay for all this stuff that your dad did. And then, so you know how I mentioned that guy, Sidney Carton? He was never mentioned ever again during the middle of the book. But then, right at the end, luckily for Charles, he comes in and steps up at the last minute and he disguises himself as Charles to let him go free. And the Charles and the Mayonettes live happily ever after. But Sidney takes Charles' place as prisoner and he dies on a guillotine. They go, ching, he's dead. Now,
Good job.